Today, I would like to share with you some best practices around the creation and use of playlists during remote instruction. If you would like access to today's slide deck, please follow the bit.ly at the bottom left-hand corner. The same bit.ly will be displayed on each of the following slides. As we think about the use of playlists and its connection to our framework for teaching and learning, playlists really fall under the domain of differentiated and personalized. As teachers become more comfortable with the utilization of playlists with their students, we really want to begin designing them with students in mind. We want to consider their individual learning preferences, their interests, and their readiness level as we design and implement playlists in the classroom. So, what is the purpose for utilizing playlists during remote instruction? It's to help guide students as they work independently. In a normal classroom setting, a teacher would have a lesson plan that he or she is utilizing, and in that classroom, the teacher is helping to facilitate the various activities contained within that lesson plan. However, when students are working remotely, some of those activities students have to work through independently, and teachers aren't there face to face to help guide students. And that's where playlists come in. They help guide students through that logical learning progression so that they can meet the goal that was set for that lesson. Playlists also give us a structure that students can kind of work through at their own pace as well, which adds a layer of differentiation. Just as a reminder, our non-negotiables when we talk about our playlist, first and foremost, we want all teachers to include a learning target. Those learning targets should be derived from their standards, and they should be written in student-friendly language. There needs to be content, which means an instructional component that could be through the use of a synchronous class meeting. It could be a video or a reading or a graphic organizer. Process, we want to allow our students multiple opportunities to practice or process new content. And product, we want students to have the opportunity to demonstrate their mastery of new learning. In order to help us make playlists a valuable and meaningful learning experience in the classroom, there are some things we need to keep in mind. We need to make sure that our alignment to standards is very tight. Our learning target, any assessments, and those processing activities should all be aligned to standards. During the Summer of Learning course, teachers were introduced to a planning document that helped walk them through the process of planning a playlist. Teachers think about the standard that they are going to teach, what's the learning target for that particular standard, and we have them highlight the verbs in yellow and the nouns in blue to think about what is that standard really asking us to teach so that our learning target is in close alignment. In our planning document, we ask teachers to think about how are you going to assess that? What are possible modalities to allow students to demonstrate their understanding and their new learning? We also have them to think about those various steps in the learning path. What resources do I have or do I need to deliver content to allow students processing opportunities and to allow students to demonstrate their knowledge? And as teachers become more comfortable with this structure, also there's a place built in for them to think about how might you differentiate. You have these set of resources. How can we then begin to differentiate to meet the learning needs of all of the students within our class? So alignment is very important in creating a meaningful learning experience for students. However, one of the most important pieces is the students themselves. As we create and design playlists, we want to implement student-centered planning. We want to get to know our students so that we can use that information to help us effectively plan. Many teachers across our district have utilized the first couple weeks of school to do icebreakers and community building and team building activities with their classes. Some of the information that they gained during that time period could be very valuable in creating learning experiences that meet the needs of our students. Many teachers utilize things like Google Forms or a Google Doc to give students a learning profile survey. Linked in the slide deck is some of the resources that we have around learner profile, which is basically a learning inventory for our students. Many of the examples listed in this Google folder ask questions about how students like to learn. How do they think they learn best? What kind of environment do they prefer to learn in? Do they prefer to learn with someone or by themselves? It also asks about their interests and their home life so that you can start planning instruction that is really tailored to the needs of students within the classroom. Asking students for feedback is also a very, very valuable tool in designing effective playlists. After giving students a playlist to complete, teachers could give a quick Google survey or add questions to the end of that playlist to gather feedback to see what worked well for students, what didn't work well, and any suggestions they might have for learning activities in the future. Also, as teachers become comfortable in the creation of playlists, really thinking about how we begin to differentiate to meet the needs of the students in our classroom. We try to be very deliberate about the language that we used in talking about the non-negotiables of our playlist. Content, process, and product were the words that we used in our non-negotiables in order to build a connection to the work of Carolyn Tomlinson and her work around differentiation. So we want teachers to begin thinking about how they can differentiate to meet the needs of their students. And student choice is a great way to provide students ownership and differentiate at the same time. Some other quick tips and tricks to keep in mind: consistency. As we work with teachers on the creation and utilization of playlists in the classroom, one of the things we want to make sure is that our phrasing within our playlist are consistent. For example, many of our teachers are using words like learn it, practice it, show it to delineate the various components of a playlist. And if those are the phrases that a teacher chooses to use, they need to continue that use anytime they create and use a playlist with students, just so it allows students to key in on what they should be doing for that particular component of the playlist. Images, icons, and symbols that may be embedded throughout the playlist also need to remain consistent, and there are a few great places to pull those from. Canvas Commons has pre-made buttons that teachers can pull into their courses. The Noun Project also provides teachers with tons of icons for free that they could utilize within those playlists to indicate to students what they should be doing. Another key component is appropriateness. When giving students various tasks, we want to think about how they are designed. Many of the activities embedded within a playlist are going to be done independently by the student, depending on the age of the student. So we want to keep that in mind as we roll those out. We don't want to roll out new pieces of technology or new strategies in those playlists without first modeling them during some type of synchronous instruction. Because rolling out a new piece of technology or a new strategy without modeling may cause a great deal of confusion for our students. Also keep in mind time and the length of time. We're trying to mimic as closely as possible a normal length of a class period or the normal length for how long you would teach a subject area in elementary school. And so just keeping that in mind as we design our playlist, there should be a balance between the synchronous and the asynchronous activities that match up to the length of that typical student schedule. Also keeping in mind the fact that we want students to have opportunities to not only process content, but to get up and move. There's a ton of brain research that supports movement in the classroom, and we know students do not need to be sitting for long periods of time in front of a screen. So thinking about how we design playlists to chunk the activities that we've embedded throughout. Allowing students to have brain breaks throughout that playlist and intentionally embedding them and suggesting them to students is very important. There's a Google extension called Move It that students can install on their Chrome browser to set notifications. So as they work independently through their playlist, it would give them an indication of when they need to get up and when they need to move. Embedding SEL activities and mindfulness exercises throughout those playlists are also beneficial to our students because we know this is a stressful time for everyone. And another key thing to remember is just because we're using a digital platform and we're using a digital playlist, all of the activities embedded throughout that playlist do not have to be digital. It is perfectly acceptable to have students do things offline, even if you want them to snap a picture or take a video explanation and submit that at a later time. As you begin working with teachers on the creation and utilization of playlists, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to try to work with you or your teachers around best practices.